I've always thought that the sound of a coffee grinder at 6 in the morning was one of the loneliest noises in the world. Not because it's sad, exactly, but because it reminds you of the hour when the rest of the city is still asleep, and you're already bracing yourself for another day. My apartment sits above a place called Maple and Main Coffee, the kind of shop that smells like cinnamon and nostalgia. I'd been living here for 3 years, ever since my last breakup pushed me out of the apartment I'd been sharing with Ryan. We were supposed to be forever, but forever lasted exactly 2 years and 8 months. That's how long it took for us to realize that love isn't enough when you both want different futures. So here I am, 27, with a second-hand couch, peeling paint in the kitchen, and a window that overlooks the corner where the number 14 bus stops every morning. I can hear the brakes squeal from my bed. I've gotten used to it, the same way you get used to the ache in your chest after a long run. It's just there, part of the rhythm of your life. I work at a small independent bookstore 3 blocks away, a job that doesn't pay much but gives me the comfort of being surrounded by stories. The owner, Margot, is in her late 60s, dresses like a librarian from an old movie, and has a way of making you feel like you've just confessed your deepest secret when she looks at you over her glasses. She's also the reason I haven't quit, even when the rent hikes start to make my hands shake every time I open a bill. The first time I saw him was a Tuesday morning in February. Portland winters are more rain than snow, a constant drizzle that soaks into your bones, and that day was no exception. I was standing in line at Maple and Main, clutching a paper cup of coffee that was still too hot to drink. He walked in like he didn't belong there, not in the sense that he looked lost, but in the sense that he looked like he was carrying a different kind of weather inside him. Tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges and a jawline that looked like it had been drawn with too much confidence. His coat was black, not the kind of puffer jacket everyone here wears, but something tailored, expensive. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no milk. I noticed his hands, long fingers, clean nails, a faint scar across the knuckle of his right hand. The kind of detail that sticks with you for no reason you can explain. When he turned, our eyes met for the briefest moment, and there was something there, not recognition exactly, but a pause, like he was trying to place me in a memory that didn't exist. I didn't think much of it then. People pass through this city all the time, drifting in and out of each other's lives without warning. But 2 days later, he was back, and then again the next week, and each time, he sat at the same table by the window, drinking his coffee slowly, like he had nowhere else to be. The 4th time I saw him, it was pouring, not the usual Portland drizzle, but the kind of rain that makes the air taste like metal and forces you to look at the ground when you walk. I was already drenched by the time I pushed open the coffee shop door, my hair sticking to my cheeks, my jeans clinging to my legs. He was there, same table. Same black coffee in front of him, steam curling upward. This time, though, he wasn't looking out the window. He was looking straight at me. It's strange how a glance can feel like a conversation. His eyes were dark, not brown exactly, but the color of wet soil, deep and unreadable. There was a stillness about him, like everything around us was moving except him. I ordered my latte and found the last empty seat in the shop, 2 tables away from his. I pulled a book out of my bag, The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro, and tried to focus on the words. But you can feel it when someone's attention is fixed on you, even without looking up. When I finally did glance his way, he spoke, "Is it good?" For a moment I thought he meant the weather, which would have been absurd, given the downpour outside, but then I realized he was nodding toward my book. "It's quiet," I said, because that was the only word that felt right. Beautiful in a quiet way. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I like quiet things." That was it. No introduction, no small talk about where I worked or if I lived nearby. He went back to his coffee like the exchange had been enough. The next time, I decided to sit at the table next to his. Not right across, that would have felt too direct, but close enough that we could talk if either of us wanted to. He was sketching in a small black notebook. I only caught a glimpse when he shifted in his seat, a series of architectural lines, clean and precise, like the bones of a building. "You're an architect?" I asked. He looked up, startled, like he'd forgotten anyone else was there. "Was," he said finally. "Not anymore." There was a story in that single word, "was." But he didn't offer it, and I didn't push. Instead, I told him about the bookstore, about Margot and the smell of old pages and the fact that people still come in asking for directions like we're some kind of tourist information desk. "I like bookstores," he said. They're one of the last places where time slows down. That sentence stayed with me long after he left. Over the next few weeks, our conversations grew in small increments, a sentence here, a question there. I learned his name was Ethan Hale, that he'd moved to Portland a few months ago, and that he never talked about why. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did talk, his words felt carefully chosen, like he didn't want to waste them. One evening, when the shop was about to close, he asked, "Do you ever feel like you're living the same day over and over?" "All the time," I admitted. "It's comfortable. And exhausting." He nodded, like I'd given the answer he'd been expecting. That night, I walked home thinking about him. Not in the way you think about someone you have a crush on, not yet. More like the way you think about a photograph you can't quite place, but you keep returning to because it feels familiar. It was a Wednesday in early March when Ethan didn't show up that I told myself I wasn't looking for him, that I was just there for the coffee and the excuse to sit in Maple and Maine's warmth before heading to the bookstore. But the truth was, my eyes went straight to his table the second I walked in, and it stayed empty. The next day, same thing. By Friday, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined whatever strange little rhythm had been forming between us. People drift in and out of lives all the time. Maybe his absence was just the natural end of ours, but on Saturday morning, when I stepped through the door, there he was, and he looked different. His hair was damp, curling slightly from the rain, and his eyes had that faint red haze that comes from not sleeping enough. His hands were wrapped around his coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. "You vanished," I said before I could stop myself. "I had to go somewhere," he replied, the words slow and measured. "Somewhere, not visit someone or take a trip. Just somewhere that I wanted to ask more," but his expression told me that if I pushed, the conversation would end. So I told him about the little boy who came into the bookstore yesterday asking if we had any books about dinosaurs that eat people. That made him smile, not a big one, but enough to cut through whatever heaviness he was carrying. Over the following weeks, Ethan's presence became part of my life in a way I didn't fully register at first. We never exchanged phone numbers, never made plans to meet. But somehow, we kept finding each other in that coffee shop, our conversations stretching a little longer each time that I learned he grew up in the Midwest, somewhere in Illinois, though he never said exactly where. I learned he had a sister named Claire, and that he hadn't spoken to her in over a year. He learned that I hated the sound of ticking clocks, that my father left when I was 7, and that my mother calls me every Sunday evening without fail, always asking the same 3 questions. "Are you eating enough? Are you seeing anyone? Are you happy?" One rainy afternoon, I told him about Ryan, not all of it, just enough to explain why I avoided certain streets in the city. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer cliches about moving on. He just listened. When I finished, he said quietly, "Some people take pieces of you when they leave. The worst part is, you don't notice which pieces until they're gone." There was something in his voice, not pity, not even empathy exactly. More like recognition. A week later, I saw him outside the coffee shop for the first time. It was evening, the sky bruised with the last of the sunset. He was standing across the street, hands in his pockets, staring at the entrance like he was debating whether to go in. That I almost called out, but then a man approached him, tall, wearing a gray coat, and the way Ethan's shoulders tensed made me stop. They spoke for less than a minute, too far for me to hear, but I caught the way the man leaned in, his words quick and sharp. Ethan's jaw tightened. He said something back, clipped and low. The man gave a small, almost mocking nod, then walked away. When Ethan finally noticed me, the tension was gone from his face, replaced with that calm, measured expression I'd come to know. "Hey," he said, as if nothing had happened. "Want to grab a coffee?" I didn't ask about the man. Not then. But I started to wonder if Ethan's silences weren't just part of his personality. Maybe they were a kind of shield. The night after I saw Ethan with the man in the gray coat, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't just curiosity, though that was part of it. It was the way Ethan had smoothed over the moment like it had never happened. As if silence could erase what I'd seen. The next morning, I went to Maple and Main earlier than usual. He was already there, hunched slightly over his coffee, notebook closed on the table. "You're here early," I said. "So are you," he replied, eyes flicking up. There was the faintest trace of a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I sat across from him, something I'd never done before. Normally, we kept that small, polite distance between us, the kind that says we're not in each other's lives enough for this to be intimate. But not today. Who was he? I asked, his fingers tightened around the mug. Just for a second. What makes you think I know who you mean? The guy outside. Gray coat. The one who looked like he was warning you about something. Ethan leaned back in his chair, gaze steady. He's nobody. Nobody. That was the same word my mother used when she didn't want me to know my father's name. It didn't mean nothing. It meant too much to explain. We didn't talk much after that. I left earlier than usual, telling myself I wasn't hurt, that I didn't expect him to open up. But there was a heaviness in my chest, the kind you get when you realize you might care more than you planned to. 2 days passed without seeing him. On the third night, I was walking home from the bookstore when I spotted him half a block ahead. He was leaning against the wall outside a late-night convenience store, head bent toward his phone. That I almost called out, but then I saw the same man in the gray coat step out from the shadows. This time, they didn't speak. Ethan just handed him something small, quick enough that I couldn't see what it was. The man slipped it into his pocket and walked away without a word. Ethan stayed there for a moment, his shoulders dropping like the air had gone out of him, then turned and walked in the opposite direction that I followed. Not far, just enough to see him head toward a part of the city I never went to. Old industrial buildings, their windows boarded up, graffiti curling along the bricks. He disappeared into one of them without looking back. The next day, he was at the coffee shop again, sitting in his usual seat, reading a newspaper like nothing had happened. That I sat down across from him, heart thudding. Why do I feel like you live in two different worlds? I asked. That he didn't answer right away. Instead, he folded the newspaper carefully, set it aside, and met my eyes. Because you're starting to notice things most people would rather ignore. There was no accusation in his voice. If anything, it sounded like he was warning me. The following week felt like living in a split screen. In one half, I had the bookstore, customers asking for novels they'd never finish, Margot fussing over the display table like it was a piece of art, the comforting smell of paper and dust. In the other half, I had Ethan. Or rather, the idea of Ethan, the moments we shared, and all the moments he wouldn't let me see. Every time we met, the pull was stronger. Not just attraction, something deeper, heavier. Like he was a story I wasn't supposed to read, but had already skimmed enough pages to know I couldn't put it back on the shelf. One Thursday, the rain stopped for the first time in days, and the air smelled faintly of wet pavement and cedar. I saw Ethan through the coffee shop window before I stepped in. When I walked up to his table, he said, "You ever just get in your car and drive? No destination, no plan, just drive until you feel different?" I thought about it. No. I'm not really the spontaneous type. "Maybe you should try it," he said, standing. "Come on." Before I could think of a reason to say no, I was following him out the door. His car was an older black sedan, clean but not new. There was nothing personal inside, no receipts, no crumbs, no air freshener shaped like a tree. It was like a rental, except I knew it wasn't. We drove east, out of the city, past neighborhoods I barely recognized. Ethan didn't talk much, but when he did, his questions were strangely precise. "If you had to leave Portland tomorrow, what's the one thing you'd regret not seeing again? What's something you've never told anyone because you didn't think they'd believe you?" I answered honestly, even when I didn't know why he was asking. Maybe it was because he listened like the answers mattered. After nearly an hour, we stopped at an overlook. The city stretched out below us, lights flickering as the sky deepened into blue. "It's quieter up here," I said. "That's why I come," he replied. There was a pause, the kind where the air feels charged, like it's holding something between you. I almost asked about the man in the gray coat, about the boarded-up building, about why he seemed to carry a shadow with him everywhere. Instead, I said, "I like being here with you." Ethan looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, I thought he might tell me everything. But he just nodded once, like that was enough. We didn't talk much on the drive back, but I noticed his hands tighten on the steering wheel every time we passed a certain kind of car, black SUVs, tinted windows. Once, he even took an unexpected turn down a side street, his jaw set. When he dropped me off, he said, "You should be careful walking home at night." His tone made it sound less like advice and more like a quiet order. 2 days later, I found something slipped under my apartment door, a small, folded piece of paper. No name. No signature. Just one sentence in neat, block letters, stop asking about him. I read the note 3 times, my fingers pressing into the creases until the paper felt soft. Stop asking about him. There was no question who him was. The hallway outside my apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge from the neighbor's unit. I opened the door just enough to look both ways. Empty. No one walking down the stairs, no footsteps, no shadow under another door. I locked it. Twice, at the bookstore the next morning, I kept scanning the street through the rain-streaked front windows. Every time a man in a dark coat passed by, my stomach tightened. Margot noticed my distraction. "You're jumpy today," she said, adjusting her scarf. "Did you drink too much coffee or not enough?" "Not enough," I lied. The truth was, I felt like someone had shifted the ground under me just enough that I couldn't find my balance. That evening, Ethan was at Maple and Main, sitting at his usual table, flipping through a book I'd recommended weeks ago. When he looked up and saw me, his expression softened in that almost imperceptible way it did, like the smallest weight had been lifted from his shoulders. I didn't sit down right away. I just stood there and said, "Someone left a note under my door." His eyes sharpened instantly. "What did it say?" "That I should stop asking about you." He didn't look surprised. If anything, his jaw set tighter, and a muscle worked in his cheek. "You didn't see who it was?" I shook my head. Ethan leaned forward slightly, voice lower. "Emily, if anyone approaches you, if anyone asks questions about me, don't answer. Don't try to be clever. Just walk away." There was something in his tone that made my chest tighten, not fear exactly, but a deep, cold understanding that whatever this was, it wasn't just my imagination. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the streetlight glow reflected off the wet pavement. Finally, I said, "You could tell me what's going on." He didn't meet my eyes. "If I did, you'd wish I hadn't." A week passed like that, him in his quiet orbit, me in mine, the space between us charged with things unsaid. But then one night, as I was locking the bookstore, I saw him across the street. He was leaning against a lamppost, hands in his pockets, watching me. When I crossed over, he didn't move until I was standing right in front of him. "I'll walk you home," he said. "Just tonight." We didn't speak much on the way, but halfway there, he brushed his hand against mine. Not an accident. Not casual. I took it without thinking. The warmth of his fingers wrapped around mine felt like the first honest thing between us in weeks. When we reached my building, he didn't let go right away. His eyes searched my face for something, maybe hesitation, maybe fear. Whatever he saw must have been enough, because he said, "If I asked you to trust me without knowing why, could you?" I swallowed. "I think I already do." For the first time since I met him, Ethan smiled fully, and it wasn't the small, guarded smile I'd seen before. It was something warmer, almost dangerous in its own way. "I didn't sleep that night." Ethan insisted I stay at the brick building, safer than your apartment, he'd said, and gave me the narrow bed in the back room. The sheets were clean but smelled faintly of coffee and something metallic, like tools. I lay there listening to the muffled sound of him moving in the main room, the quiet thud of drawers opening, the click of a lock, the occasional low hum of his voice on the phone. I couldn't make out the words. Around 2 in the morning, the footsteps stopped. A moment later, the door opened just enough for light from the desk lamp to fall across the bed. "You're still awake," he said. I sat up. "So are you." He leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt tight, like it was holding something neither of us had been willing to name. "Ethan," I said finally, "I'm already in this. Whatever this is. You can keep telling me half-truths, but it won't change the fact that I'm here." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Then, without a word, he crossed the room. I don't know who moved first, maybe both of us. But suddenly his hands were in my hair, mine were gripping the front of his shirt, and the space between us was gone. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate, the kind of kiss that feels like an admission and a warning at the same time. His fingers traced the line of my jaw like he was memorizing it, and when he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "This is a bad idea," he murmured. "I know," I whispered. "But I don't care." The moment should have lasted longer, but it didn't. A sharp ping broke the silence. Not a phone notification, but something more mechanical, metallic. Ethan froze. "Stay here," he said, his voice suddenly all steel as he slipped out the door. I heard the scrape of a chair, then the soft but unmistakable sound of a handgun being drawn from somewhere. My chest tightened. Seconds later, the lights cut out. I slid off the bed, moving toward the faint glow from the street lamp outside the covered window. My ears caught the sound of a lock being tested, not from inside, but from the other door, the one that led to the lot. Then Ethan's voice, low and sharp, "You picked the wrong night." A crash followed, wood splintering, something heavy hitting the floor. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding. There were muffled grunts, the scrape of boots, and then silence. When the lights flickered back on, Ethan stood in the doorway, breathing hard, a cut blooming red along his cheekbone. The other man, someone I'd never seen before, was on the floor, wrists bound with a black zip tie. Ethan's eyes locked on me. "You can't go back to your apartment. Not now." By the time Ethan finished on the phone, the man on the floor was gone, handed off to someone I didn't meet, taken somewhere I didn't ask about. Ethan moved quickly, shoving clothes, a flashlight, and 2 small duffel bags into the trunk of his car. "You have 15 minutes, he said. "Pack whatever you can't live without." I thought about arguing, about the bookstore, about my apartment, about how insane this was, but something in his voice made me swallow the words. Instead, I ran up the stairs to my place and stood in the middle of it for a long, stupid second. What do you take when you don't know if you're coming back? I grabbed my worn leather jacket, my toothbrush, a stack of letters from my mother, the old Polaroid of me and my best friend Rachel at 16, and the one book I couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else felt suddenly irrelevant. When I came back down, Ethan took the bag from me without a word and tossed it into the back seat. We drove through the empty streets without speaking. The city lights faded, replaced by long stretches of highway. The darkness outside the windows felt heavier than it should have, like it was pressing in. Finally, I asked, "So where are we going?" Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. "Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere I can think." "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "It's not." We stopped just before dawn at a roadside motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Flickering neon sign, faded paint, a vending machine with snacks that probably expired a year ago. Inside the room, I sat on the edge of the bed while Ethan locked the door, then checked the window twice. Only when he seemed satisfied did he sit in the chair opposite me. "You need to understand something," he said. "The people after me, after us now, they don't stop. They don't forget. The best thing you could do is walk away while you still can." "Is that what you'd do if you were me?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. "If I were you, I never would have gotten involved. But I am involved," I said quietly. "And I'm not walking away." For a moment, he just looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I wasn't just an architect," he said. "I designed things for people I shouldn't have worked with. Places built to keep people in, or keep others out. And then I found something I wasn't supposed to. I walked away, but not clean. They think I still have it. Do you?" His eyes didn't leave mine. "Yes." A knock on the door made both of us go still. 3 sharp raps, followed by silence. Ethan motioned for me to move behind the bed. I did. When he opened the door, a woman stood there, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, leather jacket. She glanced at me once, then back at Ethan. "They found your apartment," she said. "It's gone." Gone, the word sat heavy in my stomach. My apartment wasn't just a place, it was my one patch of stability. And now it was nothing. Ethan shut the door and locked it again. "We're leaving in 5 minutes." The motel was a temporary pause, a fragile bubble that couldn't last. Before dawn, we were packed into Ethan's car, headlights cutting through the dense fog that rolled over the highway like a slow-moving wave. As we drove, Ethan explained in low tones, "The people chasing me aren't just local. They have reach, politics, business, enforcement. I've spent years trying to disappear. But some things you can't outrun." I listened, half in disbelief, half in shock. How had I stumbled into a world so far from the quiet bookstore aisles and rainy city sidewalks I knew? Hours later, we arrived at a small safe house on the outskirts of Seattle, a nondescript building surrounded by pine trees, with no signs of life except a satellite dish mounted crookedly on the roof. Inside, a few others were waiting, a wiry man with gray hair who introduced himself as Simon, and a woman named Maya with eyes sharp enough to cut glass. They greeted Ethan with a familiarity that made me realize this was more than a safe house. It was a refuge, a battleground, and maybe even a prison. Ethan didn't waste time. He handed me a burner phone and said, "You'll need this. No texts, no social media. Only calls on my signal." Maya showed me how to use it, and Simon took me aside to explain the rules. Don't talk about this place outside, don't ask questions that aren't answered, and above all, trust no one outside this room. That night, Ethan sat beside me on a rickety couch, the weight of everything pressing between us. "What's the thing you're hiding?" I asked. He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. "This," he said, voice tight, "contains files that could topple governments, expose corrupt corporations, things some very dangerous people want buried forever." I looked at him, the man I thought I was just getting to know, and realized everything had changed. That we weren't just running from shadows, we were chasing a truth that could cost us everything. The weight of the hard drive in Ethan's hand felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. It wasn't just a piece of metal and plastic, it was a detonator, a key, and a curse all at once. Simon paced the room, talking fast. "This data, it's explosive. If it gets into the wrong hands, it won't just destroy careers, it could destabilize economies, put lives at risk." Maya fixed me with a hard look. "That's why you need to be careful. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone close to you." I swallowed hard. "So why trust me?" Ethan's gaze was steady. "Because you've already chosen to stay. And because if I don't trust someone, I'm alone." Over the next days, we moved constantly, different safe houses, quick getaways, always one step ahead of the people hunting us. I watched Ethan slip between worlds, the calm, quiet man I met in the coffee shop and the sharp, driven fugitive fighting for survival. Sometimes, in the brief moments between threats, we talked about normal things, favorite movies, dreams we'd given up on, music that made us feel alive, and slowly, that fragile thread between us grew stronger. One night, as rain pounded against the window, Ethan pulled me close. "If we get through this," he whispered, "there's a life waiting. A quiet one." I nodded, heart pounding. "Then let's survive." The days blurred into nights. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar face in the dark, sent a shiver down my spine. Ethan never left my side. His eyes, always alert, flicked toward every shadow, every noise point. One evening, Simon called an urgent meeting. The safe house had been compromised. We had hours, maybe less. As we packed, Ethan pulled me aside. "There's something I haven't told you," he said, voice low. "The hard drive isn't just data. It has names. Names of people who won't hesitate to kill to keep their secrets." I swallowed hard. "So we're not just running from people who want the drive, they want us." He nodded. "Exactly." We left that night, slipping into the rainy streets, hearts pounding. Through the dark, the city felt like a maze, and we were the prey. But amidst the fear, I found something I hadn't expected, a fierce, raw connection. Ethan took my hand. "Whatever happens, I'm not letting go." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. The rain never stopped. It was as if the city itself was mourning the life we'd lost, the quiet mornings, the predictable routines, the small moments of peace that we moved through shadowed streets, faces obscured by scarves and hats, always alert, always waiting for the next danger. Ethan taught me how to watch, how to read the silence between words, how to notice the cars that followed too closely, the footsteps that matched our pace. One night, as we sat in a cramped diner, a man slipped into the booth across from us. He didn't look up. "Ethan," he said quietly. "They're closer than you think." Ethan's hand tightened around mine under the table. "Time's running out," the man continued. Then, without another word, he left. That night, Ethan pulled me close. "We're crossing a line now," he said. "There's no going back." I nodded. "I'm with you. All the way." The safe house was never meant to be permanent, just a brief refuge in a storm that wouldn't let up. That morning, the break-in came fast. Doors kicked in, shouts echoing down the hall. We barely had time to grab essentials before we were running again, shadows slipping through alleyways, hearts pounding. In the new city, nothing felt safe, every stranger's glance was a question. Every phone call a potential trap. Ethan kept his guard up, but I saw cracks in his armor, moments when the weight of everything pressed down on him. One night, I asked, "How do you keep going?" He looked at me, tired but fierce. Because giving up isn't an option. We weren't just fighting for a secret anymore, we were fighting for a future, and maybe, just maybe, for each other. The days grew shorter, the nights colder, but the flame between us refused to dim. We found a small apartment tucked in the outskirts of the city, nothing fancy, but ours for now. Every morning, I woke up to Ethan's quiet breathing beside me, a reminder that despite everything, we were still here. Still fighting. We talked about what life could be after the storm, simple things like cooking dinner, walking in the park, and not looking over our shoulders every minute. "It's hard to imagine," I said one night, fingers intertwined with his. "Maybe that's why we have to keep trying," he said, "but the past has a way of catching up." One evening, a package arrived, no return address. Inside, a photo of me and Ethan at the overlook, smiling in the rare sunlight, and a note, "We're closer than you think." The fight wasn't over, but neither was our hope. The photo unsettled me more than I expected. How long had they been watching us? Ethan looked at it for a long time, silent. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. "We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore," he said quietly. "We're fighting for whatever this could become." We tried to build normalcy, but the shadows were never far. Late nights were spent whispering plans, checking exits, and watching for signs of danger. And yet, in those moments of fear, we found unexpected strength in each other. One afternoon, I found an old letter from Claire, Ethan's sister. She wrote about hope, forgiveness, and a chance to make things right. It was a reminder that even broken pasts could hold the promise of healing. The road ahead was uncertain, but we faced it together, ready for whatever came next. One cold morning, a knock on the door startled me from sleep. Ethan was already awake, alert. I peeked through the peephole. A courier, holding a small envelope. No markings. No return address. Inside was a letter, written in a familiar hand. "Emily," it began, "I don't know if you can trust me, but you need to know the truth." The letter was from Claire. She explained things Ethan never had, why they'd fallen apart, what she'd seen, and what danger really followed him. There was a plea in her words, a hope that we might find a way through the chaos. Ethan read the letter slowly, his jaw clenched. "This changes everything," he said. That night, as we sat close, the weight of the past pressed in, but for the first time, I saw a flicker of something new, a possibility of forgiveness, and maybe, even peace. The days that followed were a tense dance of planning and waiting. Claire's letter brought a fragile thread of hope, but it also stirred up old wounds Ethan wasn't ready to face. We decided to meet her in a neutral place, a small cafe halfway between cities, quiet and out of the way. When Claire arrived, her eyes were guarded but sincere. She spoke quickly, revealing secrets that painted Ethan's past in a new light, alliances broken, betrayals, and a choice that had set everything in motion. But she also carried a warning. The people chasing Ethan were closing in faster than ever. As we left the cafe, the weight of the moment settled over us. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore, it was a fight for redemption, and the price was about to get higher. That night, we didn't go back to the apartment. Ethan drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights fading into the dark stretch of highway. "Claire's right," he finally said. "We can't keep running in circles. We have to end this." I didn't ask what end this meant. I knew, and it terrified me. We found a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind where no one asked for ID and the walls were thin. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what Ethan's life, our life, could be if we actually made it out, but that picture kept shattering under the weight of reality. Before dawn, Ethan was already up, loading the car. "This is it," he said, eyes steady but voice low. "We don't get another chance." I took his hand. "Then we do it together." In that moment, I wasn't just running from danger anymore. I was running toward the unknown. With him, the sun was just beginning to rise as we approached the abandoned warehouse where it all began, or where it all might end. Ethan's hands were steady on the wheel, but I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat. "We don't have much time," he said. "They'll be expecting us." I nodded, heart pounding. Inside, shadows clung to every corner. The air smelled of dust and rust. We moved silently, communicating with glances and whispers. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from above. A figure appeared on the catwalk. The man in the gray coat. "You brought her," he said, voice cold. Ethan stepped forward. This ends tonight. Shots rang out. Chaos exploded that I grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him down. When the smoke cleared, we were both breathing hard, bruised but alive. Ethan held the hard drive tight. It's over, he said. That I looked at him, hope blooming, for now. The fight had changed us, but it hadn't broken us. Together, we stepped into whatever came next. The warehouse was silent except for our ragged breaths that we leaned against the cold metal beams, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, replaced by exhaustion. Ethan pulled me close, and for the first time, I let myself believe we might be free. Days later, with new identities and forged papers, we started over in a small coastal town. No shadows. No chase. Just the sound of waves and the smell of salt air. One evening, sitting on the porch, Ethan took my hand. We survived the storm, he said softly. Now it's time to build something real. I smiled, heart full. Together. The past would always be there, but so would our future, and for the first time, that was enough. The coastal town was a quiet refuge. Days were filled with simple routines, morning walks along the beach, slow dinners, and evenings spent under starlit skies. For a while, it felt like the world outside had ceased to exist, but peace, as I learned, is often temporary. One afternoon, a letter arrived, addressed to Ethan. No return address, just a single line inside. You can run, but you can't hide. Ethan's face darkened, but he didn't say much. Instead, he packed a small bag. We need to be ready, he said. I realized then that no matter how far we ran, the past was never truly behind us, but I also knew, as long as we faced it together, there was hope. The days that followed were filled with quiet vigilance. Ethan checked every corner of the small house, double-locked every door, and kept the burner phone close at all times. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I noticed a car parked across the street, dark, with tinted windows. My heart skipped. Ethan saw it too. He grabbed his jacket. We're moving, he said, voice steady but urgent. Packing quickly, we left behind the town that had given us a glimpse of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but we drove together, ready for whatever came next. The new city was a maze of unfamiliar streets and hidden dangers. Ethan's usual calm was replaced by restless energy, constantly watching, always alert. One night, at a quiet cafe, a stranger approached me, a woman with sharp eyes and a forced smile. Emily, she said softly. I know what you're running from. Fear and suspicion warred inside me, but Ethan's warning echoed in my mind. Trust no one. That I told the woman nothing, but her presence was a chilling reminder. Our past was never far behind. Ethan and I sat in silence that night, the distance between us heavier than ever. The fight was changing us, and I wasn't sure if we were still on the same side. The silence between Ethan and me grew heavier each day. Trust was a fragile thing, slipping through our fingers like smoke. That night, under the dim light of a motel room, I confronted him. Are we even fighting for the same future anymore? He looked away, jaw clenched. I'm trying to protect you, even if it means keeping things from you. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but exhaustion won. Instead, I nodded, tears blurring my vision. Just promise me, no more secrets. Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing tightly. No more secrets. But the weight of everything was still there, pressing on us both, and the end, whatever it was coming faster than either of us wanted to admit. The tension broke like a dam. Ethan finally laid bare the full truth, the web of lies, the betrayals, the reason the danger followed him so relentlessly. That I listened, heart pounding, as he revealed the name of the powerful man who wanted the hard drive, and the lives it could destroy. You deserve to know everything, he said, but now that you do, there's no turning back. I nodded, the weight settling on my shoulders. Then we face it together. Plans changed overnight. That we gathered what allies we had left, ready to make a final stand. The fight wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. The air was thick with tension. Every step we took brought us closer to the showdown we'd both dreaded. Ethan moved with purpose, coordinating with Simon, Maya, and the few allies we trusted. That I stayed close, heart pounding, knowing the next hours could change everything. We infiltrated the heavily guarded compound under cover of darkness. The corridors echoed with whispers and footsteps, every shadow a potential threat. At the center of it all was the man Ethan named, the mastermind behind the chase. That he smiled coldly as we confronted him. You don't know what you're dealing with, he sneered, but we did, and we were ready. Shots rang out. Chaos exploded. The fight for our future was here. The firefight was a blur of noise and flashes. Ethan and I moved as one, instinct guiding us through the chaos. The mastermind's smug expression faltered when the hard drive was safely in our hands. "We end this now," Ethan said, voice cold and steady. With the evidence secured, we handed it over to the authorities we could trust. But even as the wheels of justice began to turn, I knew the scars would remain, on us, and on the world we'd fought to change. As dawn broke, Ethan and I stood side by side, exhausted but unbroken. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly, and for the first time, I believed him. The aftermath brought quiet days and slow healing. Ethan and I found a small town far from the chaos, where faces were kind and the pace was gentle. We spent mornings walking through fields, and evenings sharing stories by the firelight. The weight of the past still lingered, but it no longer defined us. One afternoon, Ethan looked at me and smiled, ready for the next chapter. I nodded, feeling hope bloom in my chest. Whatever came next, we would face it together. Years later, I stand on the porch of our small home, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The road here was long, winding, and full of shadows, but the light we found at the end made every step worth it. Ethan joins me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "We made it," he says softly. That I lean into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that has become my anchor. The past will always be a part of us, but it no longer controls us. That we've built a life from the fragments, stronger and quieter than I ever imagined possible. And in the quiet after the storm, I finally feel home. That it's been 5 years since the chaos ended. The small coastal town where Ethan and I built our life feels like a world away from the dangers we left behind. Sometimes, when the wind rustles through the pine trees, I catch a memory, a flash of rain-slicked streets, a whispered warning, or the sharp scent of fear. But those threads of yesterday only remind me how far we've come. Ethan stands beside me, hands rough from years of work, eyes softer now, filled with a quiet strength. "We've stitched the past into who we are," he says. "But we're not bound by it." I smile, knowing that no matter what comes next, we'll face it together.